Hello, Annette.
Hello, how are you?
I am just wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be on the podcast and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, I am so excited to have you today. One of the things we were just talking about offline is, all of the organizations that say that they're interested in improving customer experience and they care about customer experience, but how do we make sure that we take it from just lip service to action? And then I noticed that you are the author of Customer Understanding: Three Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience. So maybe we could kick things off. I would love to hear from you. What do you think it really means to put the customer in customer experience?
Yeah, it's a great question because a lot and I think you made the point, lip service, right? If we're just talking about it and we're saying we want to focus on customers, but we don't actually do anything with their feedback, or we don't actually put the customer at the center of everything that we do, then we're really just giving it lip service, right? And so to me, putting the customer in customer experience is about those three ways that we do that, which we can talk about those two: listen, characterize, and empathize. But then actually taking what you hear and what you learn and doing something with it. And that's part of the problem, right? I think there's a Gartner statistic out there that's 95 or 98% of, and this is from a long time ago, but I think it's still very valid. 95 or 98% of businesses have surveys, they're getting feedback from customers, but there is such a small percentage of companies that actually do something with it, right? And a lot of times they just focus on the metric, and that's not enough. We actually have to use that feedback to improve the experience. That's what putting the customer in customer experience is all about.
That makes a ton of sense. Listen, characterize, empathize. It's
Yes.
funny because often when you hear those terms, people will say, "Well, those are conversation skills. Those are soft skills. You just teach that and you're good."
Yeah.
What do you have to do beyond a 1 day classroom training about? All right, everyone, when we have a frustrated customer, we listen, characterize, and empathize. Like, how do you take that the next step?
Well, this is how you take it the next step, right? Because each one of those things uh, is a different way to really understand the customer, right? And so listen is all about feedback, surveys, however you're getting feedback from customers, plus the data that I call them the breadcrumbs of data that you capture as they interact or transact with your brand, and putting those together and using that to design a better experience is what listen is all about. And then characterize is all about doing the research to really understand our customers. So that's about developing personas and using those personas then to develop your products, to design, a better experience. And then empathize is all about walking in our customer shoes. And that's what we do when we're journey mapping, right? So they sound like they're just soft skills, right? But they're actually sort of the foundation of understanding the customers and putting the customer in customer experience.
I totally see it. Let's talk about the listen part for a second. I love
Sure.
how you mentioned that it's about designing a better experience. I feel like a lot of times we just say, "What channels are customers coming in from?" Cool, we'll respond to them on those channels. Like, how does it? What does it look to proactively design an experience versus meet customers with whatever experience they're giving you at that time?
Yeah, yeah. That and interestingly enough, that's the difference between customer experience and customer service, right? Customer service tends to be reactive, right? Whereas customer experience is proactive. It's about designing and that ideal experience for your customers. And so it really is about taking the time to learn, understand their expectations, co-create with the customer. That's a huge piece of it. Is this all has to be done with the customer, and then using what you learn to design the experience that they expect.
I love that idea of co-creating with the customer.
Yes.
What's something that you feel like we should be observing about our customers in order to bring them into the co-creation process, but might not be right now?
Wow, that's a great question, and it's probably everything. For a lot of brands, it probably is everything. But I think if you think about the way to identify where to bring them into that process, and where you should be observing and where you should be co-creating with them, is really to listen to them, right? What are their key pain points? And also looking at your data to say, where are we losing customers? Are we losing customers are they abandoning their shopping carts? Are we losing them because they're sitting on hold, listening to the music and pressing 17 buttons on the IVR? Is that where we're losing? Where are we losing customers? We call that leakage points, right? Where are we either losing them from that particular interaction or losing them, period, right? So those are always good places to bring the customer in and work with customers to co-create that better experience, because we want to understand why are we losing them at that point. So
It sounds like it's necessarily quantitative too. Like you can't just say, envision what a perfect customer experience would look like. It sounds like when I hear you mention leakage points and where you're losing customers, that being able to put data behind it is important.
yeah, it's a great point. You know what, there's actually two parts to it, right? There is the data and there is the quantitative, and you have to be able to really prove that this is going to be beneficial if we do this. But there is that fun qualitative side to it as well, where we do ask customers, and this is when we do future state journey mapping workshops, future state ideation, future state design. We will ask them, just, and I always say, rainbows and unicorns, what would that ideal experience look like, right? How would you like this experience to go in the future, right? And that's what happens there. Is it's very much qualitative. It's just throw ideas out. It's about quantity, not quality necessarily at that point. And then to your point, then we go and we add the data, we bring in the data, right? And we start to prioritize, well, what can we do? Or if we can't do it, how do we adapt it to what we can do, you know? And so that's where we also start to bring in the data. So yeah, always, you know, all these decisions are always going to be data driven, but some of it can start out to be a little bit more qualitative and pie in the sky, you know?
That makes a ton of sense. And Annette, I'd be willing to bet that, let's say, only 10%, I'm just making that up, 10% of organizations have actually asked their customers that pie in the sky question
Yeah,
of,
it's so
yeah,
true. Yeah, it's so true. You know, I've worked with a lot of clients where we've done, so I have this 6-step journey mapping process, which I do outline in the book as well. And that process includes, you know, this future state. And a lot of times companies will contact me and they'll say, hey, we just want to do the current state. And we just want to, you know, figure out what the current state is, which is great. But and it's a starting point, but most of them then don't go on to do future state as well, which is really sad, because that's where they need to go. You know, the current state, understanding the current state, we can make improvements to the current state, which will get us through the moment, right? And get us through until we take the time to reimagine and redesign the experience in the future. And that redesigning process takes time. So that's why we need to understand what the current experience is. So if we can fix that and make some improvements there, it's sort of a little bit of a bandage until we can actually redesign the experience to be what customers expect it to be.
yeah. You know, Annette, I have a theory as far as why it's so hard to move to future state.
All
And
right.
the theory, essentially goes like this. It's that customer conversations are bi-directional. So not only are customers telling us what kind of experience we want, but we are telling them, when you reach out to a customer service department or a contact center or a sales center, here's what you should expect.
Yeah.
So there's almost this network effect that if you're going to be an innovator in customer experience, you're going to have to give the customer experience that, by definition, for the innovator, they've never seen before.
That's
So
right.
they don't know how to interact with the systems, and that might make it seem like a high friction customer experience to start, even though that's the leading edge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my theory. What do you think?
I love that. I think it's a great point. Absolutely.
So then, how as an organization do you know how far on the bleeding edge to go?
Well, so there's this thing called the Amazon effect that's happening that's happening right now, right? And it's interesting because I had recently done a presentation for the fitness industry, and it was about the Amazon effect, right? And that's what's happening right now. Is we don't just have to look within our own industry for ideas or what's working well or to be the disruptor. We have to look at other industries, because that's what customers are measuring. That's their frame of reference, right? That's what they're measuring your industry against, right? And so I think that if you want to be the what's the word, first I can't think of what the word is now, but if you want to be the person in front, if you want to be the first mover, that's what I'm looking for. If you want to be the first mover, you have to do that. You've got to think outside of the box. There's that saying that you can't fix, today's problems with the, processes and problems that they were created with. So we have to drop everything that we know or that we think we know about the experience and just start thinking differently, and don't turn down any ideas in terms of what can be done. I'm working with a client right now where we're doing current state and future state workshops in an industry that's not a sexy industry, right? But the ideas that the customers have come up with are things that not other companies in their industry are doing, but it's things that other industries are doing right now. And it's really made them sort of pause and think about, well, the first words out of their mouths are always, well, we can't do that. And then it's like, oh, hang on a second. No, that's not, that's not how this works. You can't just sit there and go, well, we can't do that because nobody in our industry has ever done that. You've got to step back and say, huh, yeah, that's really interesting. That's how you're going to be the first mover, right? Is to think differently about things.
Annette, I think that's actually an underappreciated law of business.
Yes.
And I think that we always look at our industry or our segment and we say, how was it done here?
Yeah.
But even the idea of Balto is a B2B company, so we're always looking at B2B marketing. And I encourage the marketing team all the time. I say, like, what are some of the best practices in B2C? Like, what are some of the things, like, even in the old days, the contrast ad, does it take forever to mow your lawn and you see a grumpy person with a gray screen? Like, what are some of the abilities to bring the things that the B2C world has discovered and bring it over to B2B? And I think you're so right that you can go across industry too. Does anything stick out to you about the presentation you gave for the fitness industry that you noticed there?
I think the really interesting thing is that at the end, I gave this suggestion that actually came from work that I had done with a completely different industry, right? And they loved it. They loved it. It was just such a unique thing that they don't talk about and had
What was
never
the
done.
suggestion?
Well, so years ago, that's probably 3 or 4 years ago, I had worked with the grocery in the grocery industry, and the company at the time was freaking out about Amazon. Just so it played in really well with this presentation about the Amazon effect. And so at the time we talked about making the grocery store sort of this one-stop shop, so you'd go to the grocery store and it might be in a strip mall. And so what are we looking at when we're talking about convenience when it comes to people going to the grocery store? Because if you go to the grocery store and you can take care of all your other errands in the same place, right? And we talked about a lot of other things and incorporating a lot of different features and functions into the grocery store. So to the fitness industry, I said, think about your members and when they come to the club. Right now everybody is all about convenience, so how do we take that concept and adapt it to the gym? So the gym is in a strip mall, or the gym is in maybe it's a standalone, right? But how do we bring in, hey, after I work out, I want to have a coffee, or I want to, go to Starbucks, or while I'm at the gym, the next thing that I need to do is I need to pick up my dry cleaning. I need to stop at the pharmacy. So you kind of go through this checklist of what are all the things that people do when they're out and about, maybe need errands that they're running. Then they've got to go to work, or it's at the end of the day and they're running errands. They've got their workout, they're running errands, they've got to make dinner, all those. How do we bring that whole sort of ecosystem together so that they can do it in one place and have this one-stop shop? And so that's, they love that. That's what they've got to think about. And maybe they don't adapt, take it to heart and actually do it, but they love the idea. So
I think that idea is central to the modern consumer.
oh yes. Oh yes. So very much so. And especially now and coming out of COVID and coming out of the pandemic, right? People are looking for just convenience. Get it done, get in, get out quick, right? So, yeah.
Our benchmark for convenience has gone up like 10 times during
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to remember, there was actually earlier today, one of my really good friends here in St. Louis, his family was texting him and said, "Hey, he hasn't gotten back to us in a while. Can you go check on him?" And the thought I had was, "Oh, I got to drive over to his house and go check on him." I was like,
Right?
"Wait a minute, this is like one of your closest friends in the world. Just drive to the dude's house." Um, and I think that COVID, has largely changed that. I was wondering, I was like, "Can he come to me?" No, wait, he can't. That's the whole point.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's changed us. It's absolutely changed us. I gave the example a week or so ago to somebody. We were talking about grocery shopping, and I'm the weird one. I like to go into the grocery store and just sort of meander around, right? Well, it just happened I had come back from a long weekend away and needed some food. It was a Tuesday, and I was like, okay, I have meetings. I've got nothing but meetings, so I'm going to just order my groceries on Target's website, and then I'll just go pick it up. I don't necessarily, maybe it'll give me 30 minutes to get out of the house, right? So I placed the order, and they said, when your order's ready, it'll be about 2 hours. When your order's ready, we'll send you an email. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like seriously, 25 minutes later, I get an email saying your order's ready. Go to the app, and I have the Target app. Go to the app and do X, Y, and Z, and let us know when you're going to be here. And so I was like, all right, I have 30 minutes before my next meeting. I'm going to go do it now. So I selected, I'll be there in the next 30 minutes. And it pops up and says, turn on your location so that we know when you're here. So seriously,
Wow.
as soon as I pulled into the parking lot, the app pops up and says, you're here. We'll be out in 2 minutes. Boom. Here's your code. Show this code to the guy when he comes out to put your groceries in the car. And literally sat there in the pickup spot for 2 minutes. Guy comes out. I pop open the trunk. I give him the code. Groceries in the car. I was in and out and back home literally in 16 minutes. And I was just like, wow, I could do this more often. So,
Incredible.
yeah. Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I think organizations can do a better job of is mobilizing their customers to tell that story.
Yeah.
And maybe I imagine it looks like you have a pretty big social media presence. I could imagine you tweeting that and then putting it on LinkedIn, putting it on Facebook, and putting it on Instagram, putting it on TikTok or Clubhouse or whatever.
Whatever.
Um, but think of all the customers who have those amazing experiences and then just don't say anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that happens far too often. Far too often. Yeah. The brands need to spend a little bit more time activating their ambassadors, so to speak. So, yeah.
What's the playbook look like there? Obviously, there's a million things you got to do, but once you're able to like create a wow experience, like you had,
Yeah.
what does a brand want to be thinking about? And then we're going to follow up with X.
Yeah. Yeah. The natural thing to do is follow up with a survey, right?
Mhm.
And, how do we do? And then from there, talk about activating your ambassadors. From there, having like another just easy click to say share with your followers, right? Whatever platform it is, either before or after the survey, right? Share your experience with your followers, and most likely it'll be after, because they want to know that you've given them 5 stars or 10 stars or whatever it is, and then they'll drive you out there to make that tell that story. But yeah, that's probably the quickest and easiest thing that every brand could do is exactly that.
So, with the threshold for convenience where it is now and all of the types of convenience our customers are asking for, how do you see that changing the contact center experience that customers are going to ask for? What are they going to want in the next, 1 or 2 years, or even now, that previously might have not been, the bar hadn't been raised that high?
Yeah. If you're not already offering a callback option, some folks do, some folks don't. I don't want to sit on hold. So you need to tell me right away, how long is the wait time? And if there's a wait time at all, and I don't want to wait, give me the option to get a callback. Not everybody does that. As a matter of fact, very few do that. So I think that's a big thing when it comes to convenience is you call me. Here's the problem. You actually have to do it, because I've been in that situation before where I've selected that option, and then 2 days later, I'm like, no, they didn't call me back. Okay, what's happening here? So yeah, so you actually have to do that. But I think that there are um, other conveniences that, again, some folks do and some don't, and I think it has to be consistent across the board. And it also has to be, again, around the theme of convenience, it has to be where I want to be, right? If I want to be online, or if I want to chat via the chat pod or whatever it is. I think there's also an opportunity for brands to use text and video more when it comes to addressing issues. So, and obviously AI, right? So how do we, when somebody is on hold, try to start to diagnose what's happening, or try to answer those questions so they can go and go on their merry way and have the issue resolved. So I think AI is going to be brought into it a lot more to really speed things up, because that's what people want. Nobody wants to sit on hold for 3 hours waiting to get an answer.
I agree. I agree. And I think that that's actually also, I was hearing someone the other day talking about how customers are trending toward asynchronous communication.
Yep.
So, they, in many cases, are preferring chat, not expecting to get a chat back in the next second, but to say, whatever, I'm watching Netflix. And if it takes you a minute, I don't really care because I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
And same with social, and same with email. Um, so actually, have you seen that trend too? Because I do worry at times that chat, the asynchronous nature, if you're not expecting it to be asynchronous, is the most annoying thing in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, they've got to tell us that it's going to be asynchronous. I think if you've chosen chat, there are probably two, maybe there are more buckets of people as to why you chose chat. To, if I've chosen chat, it's probably not as urgent to me as picking up the phone and getting the answer, right? So, but there are a lot of different reasons why people go with chat. So, but that's me. I wouldn't, if I need something done urgently, I would pick up the phone and call versus just chat. But I don't mind the idea of asynchronous chat. I was having some issues with my website the other day, and I was like, okay, you know what? Like, to your point, I'm doing other things here. When somebody, pops up and starts asking me questions and helping me solve it, that's great. But again, it can't be like, okay, well, we'll get back to you in a day or two. It's got to be like within this, you know, short period of time too. So
It's so funny. You mentioned when you want to get something done, you pick up the phone and call. It's such a good point. There's a purposefulness to the phone. There's like,
yeah.
I'm on a mission. By the end of this call, I will have my answer.
Yep.
You can't kind of wander into a phone call like you could wander into a chat.
Exactly. Great point.
So one of the things that I think about there is how much convenience do we want to create for customers? And I come from the B2B sales world, where you of course want to reduce all of the roadblocks in the customer's buying journey and make it as easy for them to match their need with the best offering that you have, and make it very clear and articulate why the best offering you have is better than other alternatives they could choose. But still, in the sales world, people will put little bits of friction into the process intentionally in order to create almost productive tension, to make sure that things are voiced or aired that should be voiced or aired, or that that in a moment of the customer being busy, that they don't lose sight of your purchase, even though the most frictionless thing they could do would be come in, evaluate it on the exact moment they want, and then leave, and then come back
Right.
if they feel like it and leave. You
Yep.
you want to create some form of friction at times. So, what do you think that balance looks like? Do we meet the customer 100% of the way and create the most convenient experience you can possibly whip up?
I'm a fan of that. Yes. I'm not a fan of putting in friction for the sake of, hey, touching base or reminding or whatever. If that's what needs to be done, then let's be proactive and design the experience to be that way. To say, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we touch base with the customer, or we remind the customer, or we, do these things. But let's not create, because you have to be really careful when you put friction into an experience, because friction equals frustration most of the time, right? And so we want to make sure that doesn't happen. If to me, when that happens, I'm like, well, why didn't they reach out, or why didn't they tell me, or why didn't they set expectations, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, Annette, I think it's such a good point. And as customers, I think we get particularly frustrated when we feel like the company isn't respecting our autonomy to shop like we'd like to shop.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was in a chat the other day, and I was writing them a question about their return policy. And the representative gets back after a few seconds and said, "Hey, thanks so much for reaching out. First off, can I have your name and email?" And the question I had written is, "What's your return policy?" And when I
Yep.
got that, I was like, "Oh, are we gonna have to like go through this? Can you just tell me your return policy?" Um, so I do see how you can how it can be particularly frustrating when there's any friction, especially when you just know what you want right away.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a case where you're doing that for the company doing that for your benefit. Why can't you just answer your question about the return policy? Why do you need my email address and my name? I mean, the two are not connected in any way, shape, or form. It's just a simple question. And companies are notorious for, hey, well, let's collect email addresses and names, and then they'll probably spam you after. That's happened to me before, and it's like, I just had a question. I don't now need all of your emails either. So yeah, I agree.
So then, Annette, if we wanted to go back to the three pillars that you mentioned of great customer experience, I remember listen, and the third was empathy. What was the
Right.
second one?
Second one was characterize, which is about developing those personas.
Yeah, and what does that look like to do that well?
Well, we've got to talk to customers. I've seen so many times where people just sit around, bring in a cross-functional team and sit in a room and say, who do we think our customers are, right? And it's not accurate, and it's not the way to develop personas, right? Personas are research-based. You conduct interviews with, across a sampling of customers, and then you validate with the larger sampling of customers through surveys. So it's a two-step process there, multi-step process actually. But coming back after having done all our research, now we've got these groups of customers who have like needs and pain points and problems to solve, and which allows us to then design the experience for them based on who they are, right? And then it's also really sort of the closest that we can get to designing the experience without, then the next step would be to personalize it, for the individual. So it allows us to design the bigger experience, but then when we've got the person in front of us, we can now personalize it to the individual in front of us.
Is there room for any sort of art there?
Yes, there is, but it's mostly science. It's mostly science because, like I said, it's research based. The art part is sort of that softer side of, okay, now that we know who these folks are, now we can add some. But we need to ask them too. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are your pain points? So it's mostly science. Yeah.
Yep. So if you're trying to be a buyer persona artist and whip up what you think the best buyer persona is, you're more likely to get swayed by your biases than you are to actually land on this Michelangelo of buyer persona.
Exactly. Great analogy. Yes.
Thank you. I thought that analogy was like pretty corny.
But it's spot on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'll take it. So then the research process for someone who hasn't crafted buyer personas before, or maybe has, but it says, hey, what's best practice in 2021? Could you walk folks through just a little bit of, step by step, what you do to actually, craft that persona, and how you, put a survey together, and then, how you end up with personas that match what your customers are in real life?
Yeah. Yeah. So you start with these interviews, right? So you take a sampling of your customers. I guess you have some notion already about who they are. And typically what companies will do is they'll take a look at segments. They'll start with customer segments, right? And try to pare it down from there. And that's how they pick the people that they're going to interview. In a B2B situation, for example, a lot of times we think that the personas are role based. So it's your accounts payable person, it's your architect, it's your this or it's your that, right? But sometimes, the facilities manager has the same needs and pain points as the receptionist or whatever, so we
Great point.
yeah, right. So it's a place to start. And then when we start interviewing people and we talk to them about exactly that, and the interview is going to ask questions about, if it's a buyer persona, it's going to be around brands and preferences and why they buy and what they buy. If we're looking at user personas and UX personas and customer, personas, we're going to get a little bit deeper into what pain points do they have, what problems are they trying to solve, getting a little bit deeper, what are they doing and what are they thinking, what are they feeling, what are their goals, what are their needs, and what are their expectations. So we get into those kinds of interviews. And then once we're done with the interviews, we start to take a look at, okay, do we have some sort of common themes or common groupings across the individuals? We don't even pay attention to, again, if it's a B2B, we don't even pay attention to role or title or anything like that anymore. That was just sort of a starting point to get us going. But now we just look at how do they respond to the interview questions. And then we start to, from there, shape them into groups of customers with like needs and pain points and problems to solve, those kinds of things. Then from there, the next thing that we do is we take that out to a larger population to validate across, does this make sense? And those surveys and those questions are going to be framed around whatever the, persona is that we developed. And so we'll ask questions about of the customers about their, again, needs and pain points, problems to solve, so that we can figure out, does the larger population match what we think we've uncovered here as we did these interviews in this sample population. So, and there's some, after that, there's some cluster analysis. I mean, there's some detailed analysis that is involved as well in terms of making sure that you've got the right groupings and stuff. And once you've got those groupings nailed down, and again, we really want to focus on sort of 3 to 5 key personas. You may end up coming up with 10 or 20 of them, but we really then want to just focus on the 3 to 5 key personas. And then you'll develop, your graphics and your animations and your stories to tell about these personas to your employees, so that everybody really understands who they are and who we're working for here. So
Yeah. One of the things that's been so hard during COVID for Balto has been, we brought on all these new people. Our hiring has been through the roof, and they haven't had a chance to go to a contact center and sit with an agent or sit with the manager or sit with the director of contact center or sit with the IT manager and say, like, I'd like to see what you do and how you do it. And I'd like to understand just how you view your job. And we haven't had the chance to do that as much as I'd like. And it's been painful over the last year. I imagine a lot of organizations now are probably thinking something similar, which is it's time to get back with customers pronto.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's such a great exercise too, is to really just sit there with them and really understand the experience that they're having. When I was with Fidelity Investments, we did what we call double jacking, right? And we go and sit with, we go into the call center and sit with the agents and listen to them. And it was purely a customer experience exercise, but you're absolutely right. It's also about understanding the experience that the agent is having and how they work and how they deal with things day in and day out. So yeah, it was great exercise. I love doing that because nothing brings you closer to the customer, nothing brings you closer to the agent than sitting right there and listening to those conversations. So
Yeah, and seeing that they're a real person with a
yeah,
real story, and if you ask them a question about their life, they have an actual answer.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
So then, Annette, the third pillar, empathy. What does that look like, and how would you describe that pillar?
So empathy is all about walking in your customer's shoes, right? To do just that, to build empathy, to understand the customer, understand the experience that they're having. And so that's all about journey mapping. And that is really capturing, picking some interaction, whether it's with the contact center or it's making a purchase or whatever it is, right? And really understanding what the customer is doing, thinking, and feeling step by step by step, during that interaction, right? And we do that with customers. It has to be done with customers, and because we want them to tell us what their experience is. And so we create this map that captures the current state of the experience, and it might capture other things as well. But if it doesn't capture, at least capture what the customer is doing, thinking, and feeling, then you're not journey mapping. I'll just put it out there. I think a lot of folks think they are, but they're not. But we capture other things too. We might capture, who are the people that they are interacting with at each step, systems or tools. Was it the IVR? Was it the phone, or was it the website? We'll capture the channel. We'll capture time. How long did each step take along the way? And I have what I call my 6-step process to journey mapping, and there's 3 big steps in that. And one of them is obviously developing the current state map. The other one we talked about earlier, developing that future state map. But the other thing that you have to do in that 6-step process is to look inward and develop a service blueprint. And what that is capturing the people, the tools, the systems, the processes, the policies behind the scenes, everything behind the scenes that supports and facilitates the experience that customer is having. And it really helps us to get to the root cause of the issue, of the pain points, of the things that are going well, all of that. So that's an important step in the process that I think a lot of people don't do.
When you say sitting with the customer or being with the customer to figure out what they are doing, thinking, and feeling, are you actually like with the customer side by side saying, talk to us out loud, think out loud, like,
Yeah.
you're moving your cursor, what's making you move there? Like, what does that look like?
It's actually not. We actually do workshops, and we typically we'll do some interviews beforehand, but then we'll bring in a group of customers, 6 to 8 customers, butcher paper, post-it notes, that whole 9 yards, right? So we're gonna capture these swim lanes, right? And one swim lane is going to be what's the customer doing. The next one's going to be what's the customer thinking. The next one, what's the customer feeling, and anything else that we want to capture. So it's actually I'll call it a document, but that's an understatement. A visualization of what it is, what those steps are and what those parts and pieces of it are. And typically when we're in those workshops, and obviously for the last year plus, we've done all of them online, using online tools. But typically in those workshops, the customers will work together to come up with, hey, what's next, or what's next, or how what was I thinking, or what were the pain points? How, where did things go well, and where did they break down? And then once they're done with that, we'll have them do a readout and tell us the story of the experience in their own words. So it's pretty powerful. And then, the stakeholders that are in the room get to ask questions about X, Y, or Z, whatever they want to ask questions about.
Fascinating. Literally just being in that room is probably worth the entire session itself.
Oh yeah, 110%. Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you have some executives sitting in on those workshops and the things that they see and learn that they had no idea. This is what we do to our customers, right?
What are some of the things customers are telling you this year that they weren't telling you last year?
That's a good question. Well, I think there's a lot of it is the obvious, right? It's around safety and health, and are the companies taking care of their people as well? Those kinds of things. But
That's
also
interesting.
yeah, it really is. And the other part of it is, I think we talked about earlier, is about convenience. So this is painful now because it's hard. It's not convenient. It's not contactless. It's not this or it's not that, right? So I think a lot of those kinds of conversations were obviously shaped by the pandemic.
One of the things, I actually just finished, I think yesterday, the book Trailblazer by Mark Benioff.
Okay.
And I don't know, have you read that, Annette, or heard
I
of it?
haven't yet. How is it?
Super cool. Balto's VP of Sales actually recommended it to me.
Nice.
And the whole principle behind the book is that our customers want a business to be like a moral and sustainable champion of positive change in the world.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
So when you mention that, one of the things that people are starting to talk about is, well, how do you treat your employees? Very interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, I don't think that would have even come up as a question. It would have been like, well, if as long as I'm getting it for the cheapest price,
Yep.
hopefully everyone's okay. But the visibility around, how companies have treated their own folks,
Yep.
I think has skyrocketed. And it's so interesting that you're hearing that on your interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so important these days.
Do you ever notice that, different societal trends or even, God forbid, politics come into those sort of sessions?
Yeah, always, always. And actually, that's one swim lane that we will capture, not in every workshop,
Yeah.
but if it makes sense, we will capture its political, economic, environmental, legislative, what's the other? There's another one. I forget what the other one is, but yeah, we do capture those sometimes. Regulatory, whatever will impact the experience, we'll capture that along the way and say, okay, if you're for example, if you're buying something and there's some tax implications to doing that, especially in B2B, it's powerful to see that, right? Yeah, well, we capture that, if it makes sense, for sure.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like many people, just finished my taxes like 2 days ago, like this past weekend.
Good timing.
I am always right at the bell. I always do taxes at the exact last second. My philosophy is, don't ask for an extension because you're just gonna have to do it later. But do it the absolute last possible second, because who has time for taxes? When
I
I
love
was when I was checking out on TurboTax, there was a question that said, "Do you want to donate $3 to?" I think it was, like getting money out of politics. Oh, it was like the presidential campaign election fund, the public, funding of the president. And I was like, whoa, like the fact that they even asked me this, well, it definitely took me off guard. And I was like, how interesting that they're trying to champion, like political change or reform of the political system through $3 donations when you buy your taxes. I think a lot of organizations are looking for their message.
yeah.
And I thought it was a very interesting one that TurboTax did. I thought they did a good job with it too.
Interesting. Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that in the past. It's $3 now, huh? It used to be two. That's what inflation will do for you.
Yeah, maybe they segmented me and they looked at my tax bracket, and if I were a billionaire, I would have said, "Oh, do you want to donate $1,000 to?"
Right.
Maybe. So, Annette, where do you think this is all heading? If you look at the contact center, not of 2020 or of 2021, but of 2030, what do you think the contact center of 2030 looks like?
Oh, it's going to be loaded with AI, without a doubt.
Loaded.
Without a doubt, everywhere that AI can be used, it will. But at the same time, I don't think that it will be the result of that will be that people will lose their jobs, because what's being focused on right now especially is automating processes, right? Not automating people, but automating processes. And you still need people to do a couple things: identify the processes that need to be automated, define how, somebody's got to teach the AI, somebody's got to teach how that's going to work, right? And then and I lost my third point, but the third point was third point was about human interaction. People, I think, especially coming out of COVID, right, people crave human interaction, and there's research out there that says the more technologically advanced that companies become, the more people crave that human interaction. So I don't think people are going to go away, but I do believe that a lot more of this stuff is going to be automated, and there will be more sort of that, we talked about that earlier, sort of that AI slash self-service, and how do we get people moving through the contact center and moving and getting to resolution a lot faster than they are today. So
Yeah, I think about that human interaction piece all the time. One of the things that stuck out to me during COVID is how Domino's did it, where you
mhm.
order a pizza on their website, you're not even talking to another person. The pizza shows you its journey over time with the pizza tracker.
Yep.
And then now they have a contactless delivery, and they put the pizza on a pizza pedestal, is what they call it, like this little cardboard pizza holder, and it's just there at your door. So
Yep.
you go from clicking, buy pizza on Domino's website, just having a pizza show up like on your doormat.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, what is going to happen in terms of where will we say, yes, we need human interaction, we need people. It would be just not the same if we didn't have a human interaction. And then, what organizations are going to go the way of Domino's, where you just go from click to pizza.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big mystery that will be, that we're going to be solving over the next decade.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, we've turned the corner on that. We ordered something the other day, Postmates, and same thing. Go to the website, order it, doorbell rings, it's there. Never saw a person, it's that's just how it is now. And who knew that introverts rejoice, right? Who knew?
Yeah. And then we threatened to send them back to the office, and they're like, no.
I know now they're, yeah, no, don't do that to me.
Annette, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining. Again, your book, Three Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience, or Customer Understanding, Three Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience. And where can folks find you online?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. And they can find me at my website, cx-journey.com. All my contact information about the book, everything is there.
Amazing. Annette, let's keep in touch and talk soon.
Absolutely. Yes, let's do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See ya.